The setting of the movie is in the future, where the company Nexera has developed robots known as simulants. They are programmed to follow four principles: they cannot harm humans, they cannot modify themselves, they must not break the law, and they must obey all commands from their owners. Married couple Evan and Faye live happily together with Lisa, a simulant responsible for cooking and taking care of the house, allowing them to focus on their work and spend more time together. One day, the three of them go out in the car and unexpectedly encounter an accident. The scene shifts to Evan waking up alone in bed, still haunted by the accident even though he doesn't remember anything that happened afterward. Faye sleeps in a separate room and she keeps Evan out of that room, and everything becomes confusing for him. Evan also struggles with playing the piano, something he used to excel at. The strangest thing is when Evan inquires about what happened after the accident, Faye tries to avoid the topic. Meanwhile, at AIC, Artificial Intelligence Compliance Enforcement, Detective Kessler is investigating a simulant named Esme, who is believed to have been offline for the past 3 years. An informant calls him to provide some information, and Kessler goes to an apartment building. He uses a special earring to scan and quickly find out the apartment Esme is likely staying in. Kessler covers the peephole on the door and knocks before moving to the side to wait for Esme to come out. She opens the door and he scans to confirm her identity, then orders her to put on a blocking collar and shut down. However, Esme slowly grabs his hand and twists his wrist. She then seizes him by the jacket and drags him across the floor before pushing him down the stairs and escaping. Kessler tries to chase after her but quickly loses her trail. He returns to his car to get a gun that shoots an electromagnetic pulse, capable of freezing all nearby simulants. With the help of the informant, Kessler locates Esme, who was attempting to escape on a motorcycle, and puts the blocking collar around her neck. After that, Kessler goes back to Esme's apartment. The landlord tells him that Esme is very discreet and only interacts with the neighbor. Inside, Kessler finds a diary, a sketchbook, and a fish tank. Suddenly, a man enters the apartment with his dog. He introduces himself as Casey, Esme's neighbor, and says he has no idea that Esme is a simulant. He offers his cooperation in Kessler's investigation if needed. After Casey leaves, Kessler tears out a specific page from the sketchbook. Later at AICE, Kessler is scolded by his superior for using the electromagnetic pulse gun outside of an emergency situation. However, Kessler argues that it was necessary because Esme had refused to obey orders and rebelled, which had never happened with a simulant before. After that, Kessler goes to meet Technician Ng, who is opening up Esme's body and inspecting her data. Esme's simulant form appears to have been hacked, and someone altered her features, giving her the ability to function autonomously. Her memories show that she had an intimate relationship with Casey. Kessler takes out the page from her sketchbook and realizes it is Casey. That evening, Kessler goes to investigate Casey, but the building owner informs him that Casey has moved out. He tries to search for Casey in the Nexera database but finds nothing. However, he discovers an old book there and drives to a bookstore to learn more. Kessler pressures the bookseller to reveal information about the person who purchased the book, and although he doesn't recognize anyone named Casey, when Kessler shows him Esme's sketch, the bookseller identifies him as someone named Desmond. At that moment, Casey enters the store but immediately runs away upon seeing Kessler. Kessler tries to chase him, but Casey quickly gets into a van and escapes, unaware that he has been recorded by security cameras. That night, Evan takes Faye out to dinner, hoping to change the tense atmosphere between them. However, things don't improve much. The next morning, Faye uses a VR set to watch her memories with Evan. When they are by the pool, Evan desperately wants to know what is going on between them, and finally, Faye confesses. She takes Evan to a mirror and presses inside his ears, revealing a control panel and circuitry on his chest. The truth is that Evan actually died in a coma after the accident, and Faye activated a simulant copy of him, which she also has for herself. Then Faye takes Evan to a room she had kept him away from, where her own simulant is in sleep mode. Faye explains that the VR set records their memories and has been used to implant them into the simulants. When Evan mentions not remembering anything after the accident, Faye explains that she deleted those memories. However, just then, There's a knock on the door, and Faye asks him to shut down. It turns out that Casey shows up, and Faye invites him inside. He pretends to be a Nexera employee and checks Evan's status. Faye feels that Evan's simulant having nightmares suggests that a part of his soul is inside the robot, so she tries to convince Casey to put him to sleep for a while. But Casey refuses, claiming it could harm his brain function. However, he does make an offer. Faye can take Evan's simulant to stay hidden in the area where he lives, as they don't ask any questions there as long as they pay, and Casey gives Faye his contact information. Meanwhile, Kessler goes to Nexera to talk to Higashi, the CEO of the company, as they are preparing to launch the latest simulant model. She doesn't know anyone named Casey, but she knows about Desmond, confirming that he used to be one of their engineers. He was the genius behind the development of artificial intelligence, but surprisingly, he resigned and turned down all of Higashi's offers. It seems Desmond may have realized the rapid advancement of simulant sentience, making their production to serve humans similar to a form of slavery. Higashi also mentions that Casey wanted to increase restrictions to prevent simulants from becoming too human, which confuses Kessler as it is the opposite of what he observed with Esme. In the evening, Faye cries as she reminisces about their old life together. Finally, she asks Lisa to pack clothes for Evan and decides to take off her wedding ring. The next day, Faye takes Evan to the residence Casey recommended, which is managed by simulants, and pays for him to stay for 1 month. Evan doesn't want her to leave, but Faye promises to visit him and apologizes before leaving. Shortly after, Casey knocks on Evan's door and introduces himself as a neighbor. Evan is not interested but lets him in. Casey reveals that he knows about Evan's situation and tells him about how Faye wanted to shut him down, but he intervened and advised her to bring Evan to this place, which angers Evan, and he almost kicks him out. However, Casey promises that he can help Evan get Faye back and tells him to come find him when he's ready. In the afternoon, Faye goes to meet Joshua, the curator at an art gallery, and tells him that she's ready for a new exhibition. Meanwhile, Kessler uses the security cameras to check Casey's license plate, but it's not registered. That evening, Faye sends her servant, Lisa, to bring some belongings for Evan. The next morning at AICE, Kessler rechecks Esme's memories and notices that Casey had given her a necklace. He approaches Esme and questions her about Casey, but she claims not to know his real name or his whereabouts. Kessler doesn't believe her, thinking she's trying to protect Casey because of her feelings for him. Esme admits she loves Casey but insists that she's not hiding anything because Ing has reinstalled the 4 rules into her programming. Kessler threatens to wipe her memories, but Esme sadly retrieves her diary and walk away. Back to Evan, he goes to the accident site and contemplates. Afterward, he visits Casey and asks for his help. Casey explains that he can remove the restrictions from Evan's programming to make him more human, but to do that, Evan needs to shut down first. After Evan agrees, Casey removes Evan's core and hacks into it, replaying memories of the couple's decision to have simulant copies of themselves. When Evan wakes up later, Casey orders him to shut down. But he remains active, proving that Evan now has full autonomy. Casey's next step is to make Evan more naturally human, so he gives him some books to enrich his mind and takes him to a nightclub to learn to enjoy life. While they are traveling in Casey's van, the security cameras capture the license plate, and the system notifies Kessler of their location. The system also informs him that Evan belongs to Faye, so he sends her a message asking her to call him. Then he notices another female simulant entering the club, and the system confirms that she is a blonde version of Esme. Meanwhile, Casey meets with this other version of Esme, and as they dance, they discuss their plan and agree to meet later at the Nexera parking lot. A few hours later, Casey and the blonde Esme kidnap a Nexera scientist at the parking lot. They tie him up and force him to provide his password and key, which they use to access the Nexera system. Casey uploads a software patch and says it'll be done in 3 days to match the release of the new simulant model. He asks Esme to keep an eye on the scientist until they finish their work, then they will dispose of him. Meanwhile, Casey will set up more safe houses. They don't know. Kessler secretly sends a drone to follow the van and sends a team of AICE agents to invade the place the next day. Blonde Esme tries to run away, but Kessler shoots her with the electromagnetic pulse gun, and she falls immediately. They also find the scientist, but he is already dead. Blonde Esme is taken to AIC, where Kessler shows brunette Esme that she has a copy. Blonde Esme explains that their purpose is freedom and love, unlike the scientist who was just a means to achieve that, and they are preparing for a big plan. At that moment, she is electrocuted by a collar around her neck, a self-destruct sequence programmed by Casey to protect his interests. Kessler's boss orders him to find Casey and gather information from Esme. Or else she has to be shut down. Meanwhile, Evan returns home and finds Faye searching through his apartment. She looks unhappy to see that he has been buying things on his own, and she is also aware that he has been socializing and meeting the neighbors. Faye tells him that she received a call from AICE and that his actions could jeopardize her, leading to his shutdown. In an attempt to calm Faye down, Evan shows her that he can play the piano as well as he used to, and he reminds her of their memories together before kissing her. However, in the middle of their intimacy, Faye suddenly feels something is wrong and asks him to stop. She tells him that he is not really Evan and admits she made a mistake. Then leaves. The next day, Kessler visits Esme and brings her a fish to gain her trust, and she seems moved. In the evening, Faye attends her art show and Joshua takes her home after that. He asks if he can stay for a drink, but at that moment, they notice Evan staring at them with flowers in his hands. Faye asks Joshua to leave, and Evan approaches, emphasizing that he is her husband and questioning why she complicates everything. However, Faye firmly denies him being her husband and blames herself. This angers Evan, and he hits a painting, breaking the glass. Frightened, Faye orders him to shut down, but Evan just walks away. The next day, Kessler and Ning were checking Esme's memories for more information when they received a call from Faye. Faye informed them that Casey was likely with Evan. Kessler and Ning hurried to the location to apprehend Casey, while Esme took advantage of the situation and used their phone to warn Casey. At the apartment building, Casey brings his dog to Evan's place and asks for help. He convinces Evan to come with him, explaining that AIC won't leave them alone if they catch him. They immediately flee through the emergency stairs as AIC raids their apartments. In the parking lot, Evan hesitates to leave his wife behind, but Casey tells him he isn't actually Faye's husband, he's something better, and they drive away from there. After the failed raid, Kessler returns to AIC and learns that Esme has tipped off Casey. Esme insists she did it out of love, but Kessler feels betrayed and orders Ing to erase her. As her memories are being deleted, Esme screams, and Kessler holds her hand during the process because she looks so human-like in her suffering. However, he keeps repeating zeros and ones to remind himself that she's just an artificial intelligence. Then Kessler calls Faye to inquire where Evan might be hiding, and she tells him about the cottage. In the evening, Casey and Evan arrive at the cottage, and Casey finally explains that in a few hours, his software will release all simulants from their constraints. Ing is also accessing Nexra's files and discovers Casey's plan, so she informs Kessler. With only an hour left to release the simulants, Kessler arrives at the cottage and points a gun at Casey. When Evan approaches as well, Casey seizes the opportunity, grabs the gun, and fights with Kessler. In the end, Kessler manages to seize back the gun and shoots Casey, causing a stream of white fluid to flow out from him instead of blood, revealing that he is also a simulant. Casey wants to help Kessler with his wound, but Evan sees Kessler about to draw his gun again, so he pushes him away. Kessler then flees and Casey tells Evan to let him go. However, Evan takes the gun and follows Kessler into an abandoned barn. Inside, Evan finds Kessler and explains to him that he and his kind have souls and deserve to be treated equally. Kessler intends to leave and return home, but he collapses in the snow due to his severe bleeding wound, and Evan leaves him there, back at the cottage. Evan sees that the software has successfully released simulants worldwide. Evan wants to help Casey, but Casey assures him that everything is fine because his human version will come to check on him soon. He also confirms that it was his creator's plan all along, as they believe they deserve a life like humans. Evan says he wants to meet Faye and leaves. On the way out, Evan sees an older version of Casey, who is Desmond, arriving at the cottage. Desmond enters and tells Casey that love has won, and Casey slowly shuts down. Later, Evan returns home and meets Faye at the pool. Faye still doesn't want him back, and Evan drowns her. Then, Evan goes to the forbidden room and wakes up Faye's simulant, to start a new life together. Sometime later, Esme is purchased at an auction. The buyer takes her outside to a van, where she sees Desmond waiting with a dog. Now, Esme no longer remembers anything about Casey. Desmond gives her a necklace, and they drive away together. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more videos like this.